All right, so we've got two more things planned for today. We're going to go over Chapter 7 now. I don't think this will take much more than a half an hour, if that much, because like I said, we've gone over a lot of this material already. When we get done with that, we'll see where we are as far as another break or not another break. But then what we're going to do is we're going to create this first website. It's not going to be a lot of work, but we're going to go through the whole process. We're going to go out to GitHub. We're going to create a repository for it. Then we're going to go back and we're going to set up our file structure and stuff for it. So you've got everything. So you've got an idea of how you've got to go through this stuff. All right. So Chapter 7, you can see we're on page 239. As it says in chapters 3 and 4, we were introduced to lists and links, and now we're going to have a lot more. So again, what's really, I think, at least new in here, there's a couple things. First of all, we talked about ordered lists and unordered lists. There's not really much more to say about those. A nested list is just when you have a list within a list. And you can put an ordered list within an unordered list or vice versa, or an ordered list inside of an ordered list, etc. I always liken it to I think it was about 4th grade when we started to have to do book reports and write things like with an outline. You know, that's kind of what you're doing when you're doing that. All right. Then we will talk a little bit about description lists, and they're used, not a lot, but and you'll see them and then you probably understand what I mean. All right. Then it says how to change the bullets. Well, that's what I showed you. How to change the numbering. We looked at that. How to change the alignment. That's a little different, so we will take a look at that. Now, what's new in this link section, you already know that. We've already done this where you can link to another part, to another document. But what we're going to do is I'll do it, and if you want to try it, fine. I'm going to just create a document and put a bunch of paragraphs in it. Why? Because on the bottom of it, I'm going to have a go to top link, so it goes back up to the top. All right? And that's what they're talking about in here with how to create and link to placeholders. So we'll go through that in just a bit. How to link to a media file? Well, how hard is that? That just says that rather than going to an HTML file, you go to a PDF or a Word document or whatever. And as long as it exists and you give it the right place for it, it'll bring it up just fine. Now, the new stuff, how to create email, phone, etc. My guess is you've all seen this. You go out to a website. So I want to go out. I heard there's a new pizza place. I go out to its website, and its phone number is hyperlinked. If I click on it, I'm able to call, make an order, get a reservation, whatever. That's what they're talking about here. All right? And it's funny. I don't know. With Zoom around, I don't know if they'll eventually change this to Zoom links or something, but I don't know how often Skype is used anymore. And then we'll end up talking about these different kinds of navigation menus. And they show all of them. They show a vertical one, how to do it. They show how to do a horizontal one. Then they say, now remember, when you're doing these, they're unordered lists. Okay? You now all know what an unordered list is. So when they talk about a 2-tier or a 3-tier navigation menu, that's just a list within a list. That's all it is. All right? And then you use CSS to pretty it up. All right. Am I right in assuming you all understand what a UL tag is and what an LI tag is? The UL is unordered list. Whether you're using a UL, an unordered list, or an OL, an ordered list, what you put inside of there are LIs. They're list items, regardless. So here's our unordered list, and it's got 1, 2 list items in it. And when I did it, I didn't put much in there, but notice you could put whole paragraphs in if you want to. There's nothing wrong with doing this. All right. And it may be a good way to do it. It may not be. All right. By default, as it says, it's displayed as a bulletized list. You all know that you can change that, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit in here. All right. It says an LI element typically contains text. You could put a picture in there. You could do that. You can put images. And again, you can put in links, other lists, etc. Ordered list, it's basically the same, except it has order to it. All right. Other than that, anything you basically do for an unordered list, you can do for an ordered list. Notice what they've done here. This is kind of neat. they've got an order list, and they've got 3 different items in it. Everybody see that? Then they put in an H2 tag. But then they want to continue their ordered list, so there's a start equals there. If they didn't put that start equals, this would begin again with number 1. Because we stopped, this is technically 2 ordered lists. When you look at this in here, these are 2 ordered lists. There's 2 beginning and 2 ending OL tags. All right, but we want them to appear as though they are 1. That's why they use the start. Remember, start is an example here. The tag is OL, start is an attribute, 4 is its value. All right? All right. A nested list, again, is just a list within a list. So let's look at it. See that? You've got what? You've got an ordered list within an unordered list. All right? And you'll notice, again, they started with 4 because if you didn't, this would start up at 1 again. And if that's what you want, you just wouldn't put the start equals. So what do we have here? There's an OL with an LI in it. This whole thing that you see right here, this up to there, it's all inside of the UL. So we've got an ordered list that starts here and ends here. Then we've got another ordered list that starts here and ends here. This can be to any level you want it or need it to be. That's why I said I kind of liken this to writing an outline. All right? And if you're going to do that, a lot of times you'll have all ordered lists, but you might start with alphanumeric letters in uppercase, then you might go to decimal numbers, then you might go to alphanumeric numbers in lowercase, etc. Just like you would do if you were writing an outline. And you could even have the Roman numeral at the top if you wanted to do that. All right. Now, a description list is it's a little quirky. Some people like them, some don't. I just want to show you that's what they look like. Sometimes you see them in books when people have a glossary. All right, but they're done a little bit differently. There's no LI tag if you look in here. All right, it's all within a DL tag, description list. Then you've got your description term, and inside of there your description definition. Okay, and then there's another description term and another definition, and another term and another definition, and you can see how they end up. Now, again, I will look on your test to see if they have one of those, but if you do, just remember, if you forget how to do it or whatever, just go back and look in the book, and it's around page 245.
So on both the written and hands-on tests, we'll be able to look.
No, that's what you'll do. All right. All right. So how to change the bullets? We've already talked about this the other day. But again, list style type, and the list style type allows you to put in these: the disk, the circle, the square, and the none. We're going to see none in just a little bit. The list style image, that's when we put that star in there yesterday. All right, it's the URL that you're using. Now, their example is much nicer than mine because the star I picked had a white background for the yellow star. So I'd have to go in there and either use a different image, or I'd have to go use some software to see if I could remove that. All right. But it's very similar to what I've showed you. All right. So as it says, you can change the bullet that's displayed in an unordered list by using the list style type property. And since you can change the one for an unordered list, you can also change the one for an ordered list. Now, you'll notice in there, decimal is the default. So if that's okay with you, you don't have to set it at all. All right. If you want a leading 0, I don't know why you'd want to do that, but there might be a very good reason. A lot of times I'll tell you a reason that you might want to do that. All right? Depending on what software you're using, if I got 1 to 10 and then I go 11, 12, etc., with some things, after the 1, it'll when it's saving and whatever, it'll save underneath it the 11 because they both start with 1. So a lot of times when I save my stuff, I put a 0 in front of it. So if I know they're going to be 10 or more, 0, 1 will, 0, 2, 0, 3, etc. I know that the order that they'll be in. So I guess there could be a reason for that. We've already looked at the lower alpha, the upper alpha, the lower Roman, and the upper Roman. All right, so I'm not going to say any more about those. Again, you can change those. The default is decimal, so if you don't change it, unless told otherwise, that's what it does. As far as alignment, guess what? You actually know how to align these now. You can add margin, remove margin, you can add padding, you can remove padding. I mean, some people, or I shouldn't even say that. What they're trying to do here is by default, this probably typically would have been moved over and the dots probably would have been about here. So you can go in and you can add padding and you can add margin. And I should mention too, because I didn't say this yesterday, when you're adding padding and margin, you can put negative numbers in there. You can do that because you might want something to be off the screen when a program starts and basically make its way onto the screen. There could be a very valid reason for doing that. So as it says here, you can use margins and padding to control the indentation for items in either type of list. You can also use it to remove the indentation. It says these techniques work best if you specify these using M's or REMs. M's work too. All right, so for links, we are up to page, keep in here. We are on page 254. So how to link to another page. I don't think you need to know this. And what I mean is you already do know this. All right. So here I'm linking to something on my own page. How do I know that? Because it's not an absolute URL, right? It doesn't start with HTTP or HTTPS or FTP. All right. And they're actually making it, so I'm basically, let's say I'm on the home page and I want to go to the cart page. All right. And let's look at what else is there. We've got access key equals C. What does that mean? That means typically you can use either Control C or Alt C on your keyboard as a shortcut. All right, that's the access key. Tab index, 0. What does that mean? Some people especially, believe it or not, there are still people like me that are working that before computers, they ended up using, or when they started using computers, a lot of the packages that they use, you tab to go from one place to another. So if you set the tab index to 0, that's where typically where your cursor will appear when the program starts. What you'll see when we come in, I think it's chapter 11, and we start creating forms, that by default, your tab order for your forms is the order in which you put things on the form. Okay, so if you put your button that's going to submit if you put that in first, and then put the other stuff on top of it, the tab index for the button is naturally going to be 0. All right, because it thinks that we want to go there. You can just manually change it like this. All right. Now, when you're doing this, here's another thing. Notice, because this is an important example right there. You've got a href, etc., but what you're putting in there is an image. In other words, this is a clickable image. So that's how you make a clickable image. You embed an image tag inside of your A tag. Remember with the A tag, all right, so here we've got a href equals, so this is where you want it to go, right? This that appears before the ending A tag, that's what gets underlined. That's why shopping cart is what's underlined there. But here we've replaced that. So what's in between, or right before the A tag, is an image tag. All right. You can even, technically, you can even combine them and have both text and an image if you wanted to do that, if there was a reason for doing that. Now, you can also put a title in here. Why would you want to do that? Well, you want to make it easier for someone. It makes basically what's considered to be a tooltip. So if you put your mouse over it like this is what comes up. Review the complete table of contents, that's in the title. Now, do you see that a lot? I don't think so. But depending on how intuitive you want to make your site, who you're making your site for, etc., it might be something you want to do. All right. So if the text for a link has to be short, code a title attribute to clarify where the link is going. Yeah, you can do that. All right. That's for accessibility. You should also code the title attribute if it contains an image without text. But let's face it, it would be possible, I suppose, for somebody to do that and lie as far as where you're going. I don't know why you would do that, but if somebody got into your site, I suppose they'd be able to do it. All right. So as it says, the A element is used to create the link. The tab order, as I mentioned, is if you're going to use your tab key. And the access key is a keystroke combination. Again, typically either Alt equals or Control, or Alt something or Control something. All right, how to format links. Now, we've talked a little bit about this before. And I believe the order, if they don't show it here, I think the order they have it here is the order you're supposed to put it in. This can be important in your CSS when you're putting, you want to put, so if this is all your A tags, this would be, A:link, A:visited, etc. All right. See that? So again, we saw this the other day. Now notice what they changed here. This says either when you hover over it or when it has the focus, meaning it's the active thing, we want there to be no underline and we want the font size to be at 125%. When we looked at the example yesterday, they changed the color. So there's a lot of different ways that you can handle this. As it says there, apply the same formatting for hover and focus. Otherwise, it just can be confusing to people. Because typically, you use the focus to get to someplace, or you hover to get someplace. All right? And that's the other thing is, when you look at this, there's what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. Really think long and hard. What a lot of people do is they for the link, they don't want them underlined. They might keep them blue or make them another color, but they don't want them underlined. That's totally fine. Same thing with the visit. They often do that. Sometimes with a hover. The focus, I don't think I've ever in my life once set focus. Ever. All right? And the active, I don't think I've ever set that either. The only ones I typically care about are link, visited, and hover. And what a lot of people do with hover is they'll reverse it. So if I've got a red background and white writing, and I hover, I might have a white background with red writing. You don't have to do it like that, but you see that on a lot of sites. All right. The text decoration is an important property. That's how you remove the underline, by saying text decoration : none. All right. Border style we've already talked about. Now notice, to remove the border from an image link, set this to none. And you might say, big deal. Well, you may or may not be able to tell, but on this image that we looked at before, there actually may be a border around it. And if you don't want that to be there, it's usually a faint black border. They may or may not have removed it on here. I don't even know. All right. The other thing that you can do, and we'll get into this, just not right now, not today, is you can take a hyperlink and you can format it so it looks like a button. And that's done a lot. Now, when you use a package like Bootstrap, it's like that. How would you do it here? I mean, if I had a hyperlink that said, this is not, again, not how you're supposed to write, but if it said click here, and that was that, and I wanted it to look like a button, what would I have to do? Think about it. Well, first, I'd remove that underline, right? So now that's gone. Second, I'd probably use a span or something there and I'd put a box around it. And I'd set the padding, and I'd set the margin, and I might change the color. And I could even change the border radius if I wanted it to be a little rounded. All right, so it's not hard to do. It's much easier to do with a package like Bootstrap because a lot of that stuff has been automated for you. Otherwise, it's not hard. It's probably 3 or 4 lines of CSS that you have to write in order to do it. All right. How to use a link to open a new browser window. Guess what? You know that. It's the target equal blank. I already showed you that. There are other things that you can use other than blank. I never use any of them. I don't know what they are, but you can look that up if you have an interest, okay? All right, how to create and link to placeholders. This is what I said I was going to show you. So let me come in here. What do we still have our website too? That'll work probably. And I'm going to open that up with code. All right. And let's see. I've got a contact page and an index page. I'm going to add another page in here, or at least attempt to. I was wondering if that would work, but it didn't. Not the way I wanted it to, at least. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to create a new file. And I'm going to call this about, oops, not about.html. All right, so now I've got that in here. You already know this is nothing new. Hit the tab key, boom, I've got that stuff in there, right? Okay, now, I have shown you this. I could type in right now lorem 500 and get 500 words. I want to show you something. It's not a big thing, but I want to show you something. And that is, I'm going to break out over here, and I'm going to show you where lorem gets its text from. There's a site, I think it's called lipsum.org. I might be wrong. There it is. And I can go out, so it's just lipsum, L-I-P-S-U-M dot, or it's .com, sorry. And I want, let's just say I want 8 paragraphs. Boom. It gives me 8 paragraphs. All right. Now, when I drop them in, which is what I'm going to do, into my About page, so I'm going to drop them in right here. And guess what? They're not paragraphs. I have to format them. And of course, I put them in the wrong place. Try that again. There's where we want to go. All right. So there they are. But I have to myself turn around here. I'm going to do this just because I want them tabbed once. All right. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say P. And unfortunately, it puts the ending P tag right there. So oops. There it is. You know, I can keep doing this. You get the idea. I'll quickly try, or try to quickly do it at least. Let's see. All right, and then put in my ending tags. Now, the way I do this, you probably don't care or may not care, but I always put blank lines between each one of my paragraphs. You with me? And I actually move them out so you can see everything. I'm more concerned with just getting this done. So there's my end. There's an end. There's an end. There's an end. There's one. There's one. There's one. Now, I could have screwed it up, but let's see. All right. So open with live server. And there's my paragraphs. I don't care right now. I mean, I can put in an H1 tag, etc. That's not what I'm trying to show you here. All right. So, in fact, it may be a little bit easier if I do it like that. So let's do this. I'll come back into my file here, and at the very top of the file, so right at the beginning of my body, I'll put an H1 tag here, and I'm going to say top of document. All right. And I'm also going to take that H1 and I'm going to give it an ID. You can call it whatever you want. A lot of times people give it an ID of top. So I'm going to say ID equals top. All right. Now, what have I done? Again, it's easiest to show you. There, that's what we've got, right? There's our paragraphs, etc. Now, I want to go down to the bottom of my document, which is down here, and I want to add a hyperlink. In fact, I'll put in a couple blank lines, so a couple BR tags, and now I want to say a href equals, well, where do I want to go? I want to go back to the top, right? I think I'm giving you the right one because I'm trying to do this without looking in the book. But I'm going to put in there ampersand top. All right? And I'm going to put here, go to top of document. If I did it wrong, I'll fix it in just a minute. All right? So we come in here. Now at the bottom, there's our go to top of document. I click, and I went back to the top. Now, that's not, ooh, but it's a nice, convenient way for you to be able to jump around in a document. That's the key part. All right, so let's take a look at what we did. All right, the first thing I had to do was I had to give wherever I wanted to go to, I had to delineate it some way. So I put the H1 in there and I called it top. Again, you don't have to, but since I called it go to top of document, top seemed to be a decent name, but it needed an ID to go to. All right, and that was it. That's the only, other than that, this is just a regular H1 tag, except I added that ID. Then down at the bottom, I did an href, but what we've always done in the past is we put in an address. All right, and either an absolute address or we have talked about a relative address. This isn't an address. I want to be able to jump to a place on the page. Now I want to show you something that's not in the book, but it's kind of cool. Let's pretend, I'm pretending here. You with me? I'm pretending. Let's pretend that Rankin had a top in theirs. Not a top, but let's just say you could jump to someplace else. You can put in another website address, and at the end, when you put the page in, you can put in there like pound top or whatever. You can jump to a place on another website. If the place on that other website has got it delineated like this. You don't see it that often, but why would you do that? How about if it's my site and I want to jump to a certain place on another of my sites? I might very well do something like that. I have seen that very, very, very few and far between, but it can be done. 9 times or more than 99 times out of 100, it's the way I just showed you. All right. Where are we? There we are. So, again, I don't think I missed anything, but let's look. So again, they put an ID here. They called it reason 6, and there it was, return to top, right there. And it says you can also just use it like that. Didn't even know that. The hashtag just means basically the document. You don't want to go anywhere. So to create a placeholder, you code the ID element. To jump to it, you code a link with the href. As it says, to jump to a placeholder on another page, code the URL for the page followed by that ID. All right. They show an example of that one. Yeah. Yeah, that's another page where you're jumping to a spot on another page. All right. Again, linking to a media file, that shouldn't be, that big a thing. These are the kind you typically would link to. So for instance, when I create all these tapings that I do, it saves them as MP4 files. So if I wanted to link to one of my own recordings, I'd be able to do that. Typically, what you should do, as it says in here, is you should put the type in there. All right? It lets the system know that it's a PDF. And again, as shown, the target should be blank. Okay? So you're in one page and you go to another page. Why is this important? I have mentioned to you guys, these two know about it already, that at the end of the semester, you will get time to work on it. You'll be doing an electronic portfolio on yourself. And a lot of times what people do is they put their resume in there, Some people put it in there directly. Other people have a link to it. So you click on the link and it opens up your resume maybe in a PDF format in a new window. All right, this is how you do that. As it says, a link that plays an MP3 file. So you can play music. You can link right away to a PowerPoint. You can link to a YouTube, whatever you want or need to do. Now it says their special media players may be required. Depends on what you're doing and how you're doing it. Later on in the book, we're going to go over a whole chapter that'll be on audio and video. Sometimes it's like this, sometimes it's not, because most of the major browser manufacturers haven't agreed on the format they're going to use for audio and video. All right. Some of them have developed their own type, and they want to use that. Other ones want to use open source, so it's the same for everybody. All right. I think that's good. For the email, this is an important one. All right. So if I come in here and I do this, everybody see that? I'm going to go back to the document I was just at. And I'm going to put one more thing at the bottom that's going to say, hey, send an email to Jeff Scott. All right, and I probably, to be fair here, I should really put it probably like in a PDAG. Oops. All right, so I'll put that in there. All right, and looking in the book here where they show the format, it's ahref equal mail to, so I'm going to grab this. In fact, I don't think it's going to let me copy it. It hasn't been. So ahref equal mail to colon JP Scott at rankin.edu. All right, and I put the Jeff Scott in here. So let me hit enter so you can see all of it. Not like that. All right, and I want the Jeff Scott to be before that. All right, so notice there's a mail to in here now on the bottom. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to go back again into here. And I'm going to go down to the bottom. Notice that one is, we've already clicked on the first one. That's why it's purple. We haven't clicked on this one. But look on the screen, please. And look in the corner here where it says type here to search, and to the left of that. Notice when I put my mouse there, right up above that, it says mail to jpscott at rankin.edu. Typically, when you set that up on a web page and you click there, it'll try at least to open it up in your email client of choice. I mean, I would use Outlook right here. Okay. And there are things that you can add to this to make it a little bit easier, but you see the mail to, you actually do see that a lot on pages. You can put it, as it says, a link that has a phone number in it. All right, we've talked about that already. I've never tried using the Skype one, so I'm not sure if it works or how well it works. I will tell you, with that tell thing that's in there, so I went through here before, but I'm going to go back here again to caniuse.com, and I'm going to type in tell and hit enter. All right, the support is getting a lot better for it. It used to be that on a lot of browsers, it didn't recognize it when you used the tell tag. All right, meaning telephone. This could be for a telephone number. All right, so here's the last part, navigation menus. So let's look at these, and then it'll be time for another break. So it says figure 714, we're on page 266, and this figure, as it says, is going to start talking about navigation menus. So again, we've got about 8 pages or so left. All right. It says the preferred way to do this is to code the A elements for the navigation within an unordered list. are there other ways to do it? This says there are other ways of doing it. This also says the standard way of doing it is this way. All right, so that's typically the way I'll expect you to do it. So let's take a look at what they have here. Well, as you'd guess, that's a vertical menu. They're stacked on top of one another, but they put a little bit of margin between them. All right, you've got your choice over how big you make this. You've got your choice on coloring, on whether or not you use borders like they've done here. The active one, notice they've changed the background color. You can do any, all, or none of this stuff. So notice how it's set up. It's pretty doggone simple. All right. It's just a UL. Notice it's in a nav tag. Get used to, when you've got a navigation area at the top of your file, get used to putting it in a nav tag. That's what you're supposed to do. It's one of the HTML5 semantic tags. All right. So here's the CSS. We'll see. Well, we can just about have, no, can I make that a little smaller? No, it's not going to let me do that either. All right, we'll just work through it like this. Again, no margin, no padding, fine. Our UL, this is where it gets a little hinky. It's like, okay, where do you put this? Where do you put this? And you learn by doing. I screw it up. I mean, probably you will, okay? I'm not going to say for sure you will, but I do it all the time. So notice under the UL, we're saying list style type none. The reason that's under UL is because we want there to be no dots, the disk thing that's there for any of them. We want this to act on all of the list items. All right, we're putting a left margin in there and a margin bottom. That's that area that I talked about before in between each one of those. Then each LI. Each LI is going to be 200 pixels wide. Again, have a little bit more margin bottom and have the border. So look at it. Look at the screen, please. This whole thing collectively is the UL. Does that make sense? Each one of these is an LI. Each one of these, home, get tickets, become member, those are the ULLIA. Now, I would recommend that you do it like this: UL, ULLI, ULLIA. You're giving the whole path to each one. You don't typically have to do that. All right? Now, what I'm asking you a question. Look on the screen if you would, please. Imagine I wanted this. I was going to have another unordered list on my page. Not a menu, but another unordered list. Can somebody tell me, how could I make this one special? What would I do to it? Yeah, you'd give it either an ID or a class. Nothing wrong with doing that, right? All right, so again, for the LIA, so this is the key thing right here. Display block. All right? And guess what? It does that by default, but what we're going to end up doing when we change it from vertical to horizontal, we'll change that to display inline. Does that make sense to all of you? Is inline all on the same line? Block, each one on their own line, right? We don't want there to be underlines, so the text decoration none. We added some padding. We made it bold. We made the coloring blue. And then we said, hey, whatever one is current, make the background silver. Notice that has a class of current. You don't have to do that. But it's kind of nice to let the user know exactly where they are. You've seen this if you look up on the screen here. You all know now, right? That's a favicon, and you know about that. Most people don't. In fact, I've done that already. Like my wife, I showed her, I was wondering what that thing was up on top there. But let's face it, she's getting to be like me where she needs these for almost anything. I need these for everything I do, but she's getting to be like that. It's, okay, that's what it is. And the other thing, as far as what that tab, what the tab is, where it says document, etc., I don't even explain that stuff to her. It's not that it's over her head. She just doesn't care. Yeah, okay, okay. All right. So that's the first one. As it says, that's a vertical navigation list. It says there if we want this whole thing here to be clickable, we can put it in a div, all right, and we can basically make the div clickable if we wanted to do that. But as they mentioned, this is not an accessibility tip, but if you look on the bottom here, it says to show users where they're currently at, it's a good idea to take the current element that's in there and differentiate it in some way. Make it a different color or whatever. There they made it silver. All right. So this is it. Horizontal menu. All right. And they give you two different menus here. Guess what? They are the same menu. But in the second case, they made each menu item look, instead of having it look like a hyperlink, they made it look more like a button. Again, the key thing, I think this is the same as what we looked at before, right there. What's different is this thing right here, display inline. Other than that, there's not a lot of differences. Okay? Nothing, I don't think if we went them side by side, there's not much difference between them. All right? Now, look at the second one. This is the one that's prettier or whatever, more sophisticated. Maybe you think it's worse. I don't know. Question here, look on the screen. Would it have been possible for us to remove those underlines? How do we do that?
The top and bottom.
Nope. Good guess though, but no. Text decoration, none. That removes the underline. All right. The second one, notice what they've done. They've done some floating there. They've got a float left. All right. I'm not even sure, to be honest with you, why they've done it that way. I haven't looked at this one in any depth or breadth of coverage. But as it says, you can create a horizontal one, again, using an unordered list. You display them inline or by using floating. I guess what they're doing here is rather than using inline, they're using float to show you can do it that way too. I wouldn't have done that, but that's what they did. I've never seen it done like that. And when I say that, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying I've never seen it done like that. All right? Again, there have been times when people have done their course evaluations and they have put in stuff like, Mr. Scott said said there were 6 ways of doing this and he only showed us 3. Yeah, because I don't want to inundate you. And, basically if those 3 are, one of them is probably the one you're going to use. But I'll show you where the other ones are. So if you want to use those, you can. If we did that all the time, if there's a dozen ways of doing something, and I showed you all 12, we wouldn't get anywhere. All right. So the 2-tier navigation menu. Does it make sense that that's going to end up being a UL inside of a UL? Does that make sense? That's exactly what you have right here. Again, these things can be as simplistic, all right, or as complex as you want them. Because you can work on, do you want it to drop down below it? Do you want it to drop over to the right of it, to the left of it, etc.? Because you've got control over that. And you might say, well, why should it matter? I mean, think about this. Probably, if you know that most of the people who are going to use your site are going to be using a phone, I don't know if you agree with what I'm about to say or not. I'd say do your best to not have a big tiered menu system. They don't have that much room on their phone anyway. And now if you're making them go to this menu and inside go to this menu and inside to go to this menu, they may think it ain't worth it. I say, just forget it. Either I'll do it when I get home or I'm just not going to do it. You may or may not have heard of this, but most websites believe in the 3-click rule, which means that you should be able to get anywhere in a site you want to go with a maximum of 3 clicks. Now, it's not always possible, all right? But that's the kind of thing that's not a bad idea to shoot for. All right. All right, so I'm not going to run through this. But as it says, you quote unordered lists within the li elements of another unordered list. In other words, you create a nested list, which they talked about earlier. And then they go down and they do it to 3 tiers. All right. Now, I wouldn't have used their color choices, but that's me. All right. And again, sometimes what you see is if this is going to be blue like this, then this will be the opposite. So this might be white background, and this I'm assuming I wouldn't have a white background here, with blue text. And then this might go back to the original color. That's totally up to you. Or if you're creating a site for someone, it's what they want. All right? And they give you the CSS for it as well. All right, so that's it. Again, I am assuming, I'm not going to go on today, but I just want to get it set for tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to go over this chapter here, okay? And we're actually going to write a very simplistic little program together. I'm going to give you all of the code. We're going to do it together, is what I'm saying. It's not hard, but it'll show you what responsive design is all about. Look at this stuff. Again, up till today, so through chapter 5, which is where we were yesterday, all of the tapes are out there if they help you to go back to look at them. But if you have any questions, jot them down or whatever. Don't be afraid to email me. All right? And otherwise, ask them at the beginning of class. I should really do a better job at the beginning of class of saying, hey, are there any questions from yesterday? All right? But if you have any, that's fine. All right? And I want to say one more thing. I'm not trying to put him on the spot, but Donald said to me he was having a problem before. We worked it out. But if you're having a problem, I can't see anybody's machine. All right? And it's funny because 2 years ago, I had a student who was really smart, but he really didn't like to do work. He sat right there, and that was the only machine I could see, and he'd play games almost the entire period. I wrote him up a bunch of times. He almost got kicked out of the program. I'd write him up. He'd get in trouble. He'd have to talk to me. He'd have to talk to Mr. Corrigan. He'd be fine for a month or so. He'd start playing games again. But all I'm saying is I can't see. I guess if I looked over here, I could maybe see yours. All right. But if you're having a problem, you have to raise your hand. And again, I'm not picking on you. I want you to. I don't care if I'm taping. I'll stop taping. And that goes for everybody. I'll walk over by your machine. You don't have to pick it up and walk over by me. That's not a problem. All right. If there's a dead spot in the tape for a few minutes, then there's a dead spot. If I think it's really going to be a long time, I can always come up and pause it. All right. So it is now 10:07. So then at 10:20, everybody here got an email this morning. You may or may not have seen it. You all got an email from me that looks like this. Says, good morning, to be explained in class, thanks. It's got a thing called firstwebsite.zip. I'd like you to please unzip that and have that folder wherever you've been saving your other stuff. And when you come back from the break at 10:20, we're going to see if in an hour or so we can build this site. All right, so we'll start up again at 10:20.